Pottery fans, welcome back to Moeller's Wide World of Clay. I'm very excited today because we are going to take this slab, these two extruded parts, this lovely wood sling form, and construct this beautiful little tray. So, let's get after it. We're going to begin our journey back here at the wood sling forms. Most of these forms are simply just a piece cut out of some fiberboard and a few little pieces of wood to give it a little bit of lift. So there are many different forms and shapes back here. Some are a little bit more rounded. The form I'm going to use today has some nice angles, but also has a nice sweeping curve. Some are a little bit more complicated with a few more tight angles. Some forms have a little bit larger ones that are a little simpler. They say like advanced to it. This is a big form that I would not advise a beginner to use. So we're going to put these back nicely. As you notice, each frame has its own home. All of these should fit nicely. There's 2 down here and 3 below. So when you're done with your mold, put it back exactly where you found it. So I've already selected my form. I've made my slab. So we're going to go back and I'm going to show you how we're going to set up the base to that beginning wood sling form. So let's go check that out now. I've actually pre-made my slab. I went ahead and used my roulette. I added a little bit of decorative edge to this because I'm not going to use the whole thing, but just a part. I have the original wood sling form that I just picked out, and I grabbed 3 extra tools. The weighted sock, which you probably remember from the plaster form project. I grabbed a pottery knife and a bat on which to store the base that I'm going to create with this wood sling form. So, at this point, the slab that I have created has some texture. I can choose whether I want to put this on the inside, which would be texture up, or I could choose to put this on the outside, which is texture down. When the slab is really, really soft, you can smudge your texture really easily, and it might distort what your original intention was. So I like a little bit of intrigue, so I'm going to put the pattern on the inside. I'm going to take my slab and I'm going to set this down with the texture going across at a little bit of a 90-degree angle. So I could play around with this if I wanted to place it like this, but I like how this line right here will kind of match up with that line. So I'm going to play around with the placement and right about here. Now in the beginning, I used to use this sock to tap this piece down. What I found is much more effective is if I take this form, hold it firmly, and give it a couple taps on a table. I usually do about 3. And then I'll check around the back and inspect. Did I get a nice little bit of a gradual curve on the back side? If there's any areas that may need a little bit more attention, like this area right here, I'll go back and I'll use my sock. So I tend to really go back into the curves, and I like the sock because it doesn't make any fingerprints and it's flexible. So the last thing I'm going to do is take this rolling pin and just roll it right across the top, and that really accentuates the line of the edge of the form. So what I'm going to do then is cut off all but about an extra inch of clay that surrounds the form. And this clay has not really been drying out too much on the wood form, so I can take that and drop it right off in the pug machine. I'm going to take my bat, and you'll watch very carefully. I'm going to place my bat right on top and very quickly hold the form firmly and the bat, and I'm just going to flip this over. Give this a little tug and boom, it comes right off. So to secure this, because during class we're going to make this on one day, we're going to use the extruder the second day, and on the third day we're going to assemble those 2 pieces together to form our final wood sling project. The tapping has really made this gentle curve that is super strong, and as long as I don't disturb this, the trapped air inside will keep it rounded. So inside of a bag, up in the cabinet, and I will grab this tomorrow. Now that we've completed that, we're going to move over to the extruder, and I'm going to show you how we're going to make the walls, an entire strip that is going to go around the entire perimeter of this project. So let's go over and do that now. Welcome back. So we are coming back to use the extruder, and that is the second part. Now that we've made our slab, we put it in our form, we're going to go ahead and make some walls, basically long strips of clay that are going to be attached to that base we just made, and that will make up the basic form. So the extruder works a lot like those wonderful Play-Doh Fun Factory deals back in the day. You took some Play-Doh, you put it in, you took your handle and you pushed it down, and then out at the bottom a long string of something would come. So I first want to start and just talk about the parts and how this operates. So this machine has a barrel. The barrel is where the clay is going to go. It also has a cap. This cap is where all of the dies will go. Before we go any farther, let's talk a little bit more about the dies. So I want you to think about the dies as basically a shape that the clay will travel as it comes out of the machine. So the clay takes the path of least resistance, and this die right here will basically make a long ribbon shaped piece of clay, like a long strip. Now there are many different dies back here, some with multiple shapes on there. Now if you think about this, as soon as I grab that cap and I put one of these dies in here, clay would come out of every single opening. So what I'm going to do is I have this little plate here, and I'm going to call this the selector plate. That will go on top, and it will cover up every other hole in the die so that the clay only comes out the one I want. The last thing I want to remind you about is make sure all dies are accounted for. This is actually the second one. The first one went through the pug machine because somebody forgot to remove it from the excess clay. Today I'm going to be using a die that I actually created specifically for this project. There are others and some opportunities to make some changes to the existing ones, but we're going to stick with this pre-made one. So let's get back to our operation. So I've gathered a couple things before we get started. You're going to need an entire pug of clay, and I'll kind of explain that as we go of why we need so much. This is the die I'm going to be using, and as you can see there are 3 different possibilities. I really like this one right here, and that's the one I'm going to use. So I'll explain a little bit more as we go. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to take off the cap, load our die, reach around and grab that selector plate. I'm going to load my entire pug of clay. Then I'm going to take my handle and I'm going to bring that around here. Now there are 3 settings I want you to be really aware of. These are also located on a wood sling procedural step-by-step outline of the project on Schoology. So I'm going to take this first, this selector plate, and if you notice there's a little illustration up here. When this is pointed up, I want you to imagine that the machine only ratchets up. It will not come down. This is great when you're storing it. So I slide that off to the side, done. And when I move it into the middle, that opens up these clamps and allows it to slide freely up and down. When I push it down, I think you get the idea. It's going to extrude. So as I push this down, the clay is expanding in the barrel, and nothing has happened quite yet. Let's zoom in for a closer look at our first extrusion. Watch the magic happen. I wanted to zoom out to show you all the fun I'm really having. I'm going to warn you, this clay is very dry and not the best for extruding. As you can see, it's really ripping. Now, if I had some really nice clay, we could get a better idea of how this goes. Let's make one more extrusion. We're going to use our imaginations. and believe that this is a really nice piece of clay. So when I make these extrusions, I usually make about 4. I try to stretch them the entire length of this canvas board because most often all the molds that we have will take 1, maybe 2, but no more than 3. And I always want to have at least 1 extra one. So I'll make 1, I'll make a second one, and I'll make a third one just in case, and maybe a 4th one because I'm having a great day. So before we stop though, I do want to show you how we're going to clean this out. So the first thing is, I can't just go ahead and remove this. There's a lot of downward pressure. So I'm going to slide this up into the upright position and kind of break that suction seal. Just a little bit. That should loosen up enough pressure where I can slide this off, pull the bottom cap off. I'm going to set that here for just a second. I'm going to clean off my dies. I'm going to take these over to the sink a little bit later and clean them. All the extra clay can go right back into the pug machine. And I still have a big chunk of clay on the inside. So instead of me working harder, I'm going to work smarter. I'm going to go ahead and push this back into the extrude and push out the rest of the clay. And that'll come right out. Now there is a bucket down here. That bucket is to catch the extra dry chunks that fall off on the side, or this extra buildup right here that's eventually going to dry if it gets forgotten about, or even the extra little pieces inside the barrel. So when I'm done, it should look much like this. The cap's back on, the handle's off to the side, and it's ready for its next use. So now that we have all of our pieces made, we're going to set those aside. I'll show you how to wrap them up in class, and then we'll go ahead and we'll move on into attaching these pieces together.